everybody. Okay, this is like the third time I've signed on. So funny. Today's been a weird morning. I had a meeting this morning, and then I just had like a lot of stuff going on, so it's been very interesting. I'm going to keep my glasses on for this particular live because it is very sunny out today, or the sun will be peeping in and out. Guys can see the beach behind me and my shoulder. So let's see. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, and not so much like, I mean, there's always stuff to talk about astrologically speaking. We're officially today, I believe it's today, and for us today, this evening, and then for everyone on the East Coast and West Coast, we're going to be moving out of Venus retrograde, which is really nice. Because it has been a little bit rough for those personal relationships and friendships, and for the people that are close to you. It hasn't really been that easy, and there's been a lot of separation, and there's been a lot of just complete, I saw a woman with my swimsuit, and I was like, oh, that looks nice. I wonder if my butt looks like that in that swimsuit. Isn't that funny how the mind is? It's just like, that's nice. That looks nice on her. I hope it looks as nice as it does on her as it does on me. Anyway, I hope that it was a lot of, the separations that you've had, that my goal is for everyone, for them to be happy separations. A lot of times when things come up in Venus retrograde, it's really situations that didn't work, things that were kind of built off of a false sense of stability. So when those things kind of fall apart or they don't work out, they're actually just things that were like long term in the making. We're continuing in that energy, especially since we're still in our Mercury retrograde. Just the revisitation of a lot of the things that we have dealt with previously, but maybe we push it to the back burner. We haven't like actively dealt with it in a way that was, I think, as aggressive as we normally would. We're kind of in that energy right now where we're just taking care and handling like old stuff. But I'm really glad that Venus is direct at this point. When Venus goes retrograde, I had been researching this astrologer, and unfortunately the name, it escapes me, so maybe I will put it like in the comments or put it in a story once I go back and research. I forgot what his name is, but he was looking at the Venus retrogrades in American history, and how it seemed like there was always this kind of social unrest whenever Venus was in retrograde or about to go retrograde, or just coming right out of retrograde and going direct. And it was interesting how many social movements, specifically with Black people in this country, in terms of civil rights and other rioting and protesting and all kinds of things, just people standing up for injustice. And there's just like a direct correlation between Venus retrogrades and injustices, and people standing up for it and saying, I'm not going to take it anymore. So just because we're coming out of the retrograde doesn't mean that people are going to stop talking about it. But it definitely was something that like sparked this, and so it's going to be interesting to see how moving forward that is, especially since we're in Cancer season right now, which means people's hearts should be a little bit more open to doing some deep healing. And now we're actually in a place where we might be able, like maybe if we were like kind of in a psychological sense knocking at someone's door, we've been trying to get somebody to see our point for a while, and they haven't really like tapped into themselves or tapped in to see it. Now is a time that they actually might be more open to whatever it is that you have to say to them, because their heart maybe wasn't really ready for it, or they had like a lot of excuses, or they just couldn't deal with it. Now might be the time that they're like, okay, so let me like unpack some of this stuff. So now is a good time for that. Let's see. I wanted to talk a little bit about Neptune retrograde, and then we're going to get into the bulk of like what we're here to talk about today. But Neptune is going retrograde. Neptune is a planet. It's a planet that rules Pisces. So if we have any Pisces in our life, we understand what that energy looks like. It's all about like creativity. It's about illusion. It's about imagination. It's a watery, has a water aspect to it. Neptune is Poseidon in Greek mythology, so he'd be like the god of the ocean and water. Very powerful god, actually. But in terms of the planet, it's all about kind of being in this space of the deep abyss, the waters of the unknown, and birthing things, and just kind of living in a place of nostalgia, living in a place, hello, living in a place where you're not quite sure, where you're experimenting with a lot of different things, and you're just trying to figure out, what it is that you want. So when you're in that energy, it's like this creative, imaginative, bubble of energy. When that energy goes retrograde, there's a couple of things that can happen. One of the things that can happen is that things that had a lot of illusion or had some secrecy to it, hello, things that had some secrecy to it, actually would be visible to you. So maybe situations of relationships, and stuff that had to do with like home and family and foundation and structure, and actually how you define yourself, which is, this Cancer season, it's all about like, not so much legacy, but like where you came from, your ancestry, nationality, like all of those things that kind of define who you are in this particular place. Any kind of shadow that you had about that, or things that you didn't really want to look at, now might be the time that you're looking at that. Now might be the time where you're digging into what that means for you, and moving forward how you want to present yourself in terms of that. So that's one of the things with Neptune going retrograde. I think that comes up for a lot of people. Another thing that can come up too is that you're just deeper in the shadow, you're deeper in the unknown, you're deeper in a place where you really don't want to deal with the things that's happening. You really just find yourself completely disconnecting with everything. And then that's going to be an interesting place to be in, I think, because there's a lot of things right now that's bringing you to yourself, that's bringing you to knowing who you are and where you want to go, and about like changing and healing some of the stuff. And I think like with the Mercury retrograde, and I think just in general what's happening in the world right now, and really what it looks like for our year, because there's a lot of stop and go, and there's a lot of like, okay, things are open and now they're closed, and now we don't know where we're going to be traveling, and all of these plans that we put in place in 2019 or at the beginning of the year before the pandemic and all of these things started, we're seeing that there's a lot of disappointment in that, a lot of feelings of like, I had all of these things I was going to do, there were things I was going to launch, there were places I wanted to go, there were connections that I wanted to make, and we just keep like sitting there waiting for things to get better for us to move forward. And that's just, it's a possibility that we're still going to be, well, not a possibility, at least according to the astrology, we're in this energy for a while. We're in this kind of like unsure, cloudy, start, stop, not, not knowing exactly when we're going to be able to like move forward full throttle. I mean, we do have Mars in Aries, which will help with that, and that's coming in, I think, on the 27th. So you are going to have a little get up and go about yourself. You are going to just say to yourself like, okay, like I feel like doing some stuff and getting some things done. And I think that energy is the right energy. Just where you're going to direct that is the key. And I just feel, at least for myself, and what I'm telling my clients, and I was actually talking to my sister yesterday, is I was like, now I think this year for myself, as I looked at like the year and how things are kind of unveiling and so forth, I just feel like it's really the time, especially during the retrograde season right now, it's really the time to fix all the stuff that really wasn't working. Take care of that big pile of bills that you've just been kind of putting to the side. Get into that junk drawer that you have in your house that you dump everything in, and you're just like, I'm going to get to it one day. Research the things that you always wanted to do. If you wanted to go back to school, if you wanted to, heal something in your life or heal something in your family. If you wanted to, if there was a family tradition, we talked about this last time, if there's something that you wanted to do that has to do with family, or just taking care of stuff that just hasn't been handled. And we all have so much of that, I believe most of us have like just a pile of whatever that is, caca, whatever that thing is that we don't want to deal with in our lives. Now is the time. Like, when else are you going to have the opportunity when things are kind of slow, things are kind of not open, and they're open, there's not a lot of traveling that's happening, people are just trying to figure things out. I mean, you can see it in the way that companies are working right now. companies are trying to figure out how to restructure themselves. How are they going to prospect themselves to clients, like what they're going to do to be more virtual and less in person, because we don't know when that in-person thing is going to happen again. We can see this mimicked in our lives a lot, of everybody kind of switching and saying, okay, how are we going to do with what we call now the new normal? And so there's a lot of like panic and a lot of frustration about like, well, I don't want to switch to the new normal, right? Because that means I have to revamp everything and reinvest and do all of this stuff. And then what if like tomorrow everything goes back to normal and it's going to be okay? Why would I want to put that investment in? And so the thing is we just don't know when what that's going to be and what that's going to look like, and when we're going to really truly be 100% back to normal, simply because, you know, in terms of with the virus and things like that, it's not just affecting, you know, where you are, it's affecting all of us all over the world. And where we have, you know, there's spikes sometimes and then it goes down and all of that kind of stuff is happening. So it's really hard to feel like you're in control at all. And especially with Neptune going retrograde, you're going to feel less control, because things are going to feel more unclear and not, you know, like that you're just kind of swimming in this deep abyss. So I feel like the one place where we can have control, you know, always is ourselves. We can have control over the way that we communicate and that we connect to others, and how we having a really strong, good boundaries, and also being able to like work on how we love ourselves and how we love each other. And the other thing I think we have control over is things that we already are involved in. And that's why I keep going back to that. Like, what are the things that are unfinished in your life? What are the issues that you have that you haven't had any time to address? Like the things that, you know, a couple of months ago you were like, man, if I just had a weekend where I could, you know, get this project done or finish writing this, or, you know, like go through that photo album that has all my family's photos in it, I need to organize that, or, you know, I need to finish my kids' quilt, or whatever I need to organize my grandma's recipes because I wanted to give that to my kids, or whatever the thing is that you wanted to do, those kind of big projects that you were just like, oh, one day I'm going to have an opportunity to do. Now is the time. Now take that opportunity. Now is the time to get involved with that. Not so much the time to do brand new things. If we can kind of get a handle on what we're doing, and it's hard because things are not like exactly the way we'd want them. We might not have access to the capital or the money that we need in order to do those things, you know, but at least what we can do is get a plan going, and we can start to say, okay, like, so this is what it looks like when I'm handling all of my shit, so that when we're actually out of this, and then we are stepping into like what the world is going to look like, because it is going to look different than a way that it did before, we're able to just kind of sort of go and run with that, because we've handled all that old stuff. So literally the planets have said, just when you look at the whole picture, it's all in a place of going back to the things, going back and slowing down and taking a deeper look into the way that you want to live your life and the way that you want to do things. So a lot of times, you know, we've been for the last few months here now had a lot of planets in retrograde, and that can feel like really heavy energy, and that can feel really discouraging, especially when we have like a lot of breakups, you know. Everyone that I know has had a break in some sort or a separation. And what that looks like for everybody is so different. For some people, it can be ending of friendships. For some people, it can be ending of relationships, or the relationship just went to a completely different place. For some people, it's actually been a literal death. And I have witnessed that in my own, you know, like bubble of people. And I also have witnessed that in the larger group of people, of friends, and also clients and so forth. So there's been a lot of like distancing and separation and truth coming out, truth about who we are and what we want, truth about our fears and the things that we don't want to deal with, or the things that were always hidden coming up and now having to deal with. I think it's a beautiful thing to have like a large period of time where we can deal with that. It's not often, like hardly ever, right? This might be the only time in our lifetime that we are actually getting this long period of time to deal with our shit. That's huge. So I think as we go through this, because we're going to have ups and downs with this, right? Because when we're losing things or separating for things, it hurts. And then we're kind of mourning the things that we've lost, and we're trying to kind of recoup and come back together and figure out a new way of like approaching life. It's hard to, move forward with your life when you've had separations and you've had breakups and you've had things that are like no longer the people or the situation, your job and so forth that was in your life that kind of sort of made you who you were. Is no longer there. And so there's this new identity that you have. And that's always a weird thing, right? When we, because we really identify so much with like the things around us and the things that we love. We identify with our friends. We identify with being so-and-so's friend. We identify with being so-and-so's daughter. We identify with being this color. We identify with being this ethnicity, speaking this language, having this length hair, having curly hair, having highlight. Like, we identify with so many different things. It makes up who we are, where we physically live on this planet, even though we can all get up and move at any time, for most of us, when we want to. And so we're questioning, what does that mean? What is identity for us? What does that mean? What does it mean when we have those things stripped away? Does it make us less of a person? Do we know who we are? So much of why we don't look into our individual identities have a lot to do with the fact that we just wouldn't recognize ourselves and who we have been and who we said we've been, whether even we've said it out loud or whether we just know inside. Suddenly that changes when we take on a different identity, when we've looked into who we are and we realize, oh boy, maybe I'm no longer part of that group, or maybe I don't feel this way anymore, so where does that leave me? So I think these are all things that we work out during this time of Mercury retrograde and Cancer season, looking at the identity, which essentially it comes from the mother. It's interesting. I was with my friend yesterday and we were taking a walk in the park along the beach, and she has the most beautiful little baby. so cute, and I do not want any more kids. But you know how it is when you see little cute babies, you're like, oh, they're so darling. But it's interesting because she would walk about and get about 50, because she just started walking, and she'd get about 15 feet, and then she'd turn around and then she'd like look at her mom, and it was almost like that there was this like invisible cord that she had, like, I can go so far but I know mom is right behind me. And we were talking about how like babies for several years actually still feel like they're part of their mother, like they're actually still connected to their mother. It's like they don't even understand at some point that they're actually a completely separate person. And so you go through toddlerhood, figuring out, oh my goodness, I'm separate from my parents. Actually, that's not my identity. I have a different identity. And I feel like as humans, we go through this. I think, toddlers go through that. And then typically kids, if you put them in school, and they're finding out, where they are. They're separated by like their last name or whatever, or the boys and the girls are over here, or however that works out. And so we're constantly, put in these environments in our life where we're figuring out our identity and who we are. And then we are preteens, and the same thing is like we're figuring out who we are outside of the group, who we are as part of the group. And so whenever we're having these like identity shifts and we're renegotiating who we are, there's pain and trauma can come up of that. And I think that all of those things are things that we are being invited to at this time, when everything is kind of like a little upside down, to investigate and figure out who we are, and figure out if those identifiers are actually even really working for us, right? A lot of people call them our stories, right? There's this idea that like we tell ourselves stories, like our original story was told to us by our family members. Like my dad used to have this story that he told me when I was in my mom's stomach, that I was a very expressive little baby in my mom's stomach, and so my dad worked nights, and so when he'd come home, it'd be late at night, and like as soon as the door opened, I could hear my dad there, and I would start moving around, and then I knew my dad's voice, and I would be like poking out my mom's stomach and everything. And so he would like talk to me all the time in my mom's stomach, and I was like poking out an elbow and all this kind of stuff. And so he would tell me all of the time when I was younger about this story about like how expressive I was, and how like I knew him, and how we had this connection. And so I just naturally, in hearing this story, was like, yes, I'm so close to my dad. We have this connection. We have this connection from the womb. And so that obviously is a beautiful story, but that's what I'm talking about. We're talking about stories. Now, some of us have been told stories that actually weren't beautiful, right? We've been told stories that we're needy, or that we're unlovable, or that, you know, we're stupid, or that we don't matter, or that, you know, because of this, you know, because you have something wrong with you because of this. Whatever the case may be, there's stories that our families tell us, there's stories that society tells us, there's stories that our lovers tell us, there's stories that our kids tell us, there's stories that our parents tell us, you know, and we have to decide whether we're going to actually listen to that story and act that out. You know, are we going to take that script like an actor would and say, okay, I'm just going to say the lines and I'm going to do whatever because you just gave me the story, I have no mind of my own, I'm not going to make my own choices? Or are we going to make our own choices and say, no, you know what, I reject that script, that's not who I am, I get to create and write my own story, this is a one fucking woman show, and I'm going to do what I want to do, and I don't have to take that. So I just invite everybody to not have to take the story. If there's some really beautiful things, absolutely, you can take that as part of your story. If there's some things that you're like, you know what, I don't identify with, you don't have to. If there's some things that someone's telling you a story about yourself and you're like, well, you know, that might be a little bit true, like maybe I do need to look into that, you know, that's okay too. I mean, you can always look into the things in yourself, and you know what resonates with you. You know things that are said to hurt you. You know, things that are said to like make you feel beautiful and make you feel empowered. And you know the things that are said that are speaking truth, right? And you're just like, that hurts and I kind of don't want to deal with that right now. And so you're not negotiating those things and figuring out who you are and moving forward. So I just feel like this, we can look at this so many different ways, and I could talk about all of the planets and all of the different things that's happening, which is what I did and which is what I do. But I just more than anything want to tell everybody that this is a really good time to investigate those things and figure out for yourself what works, and figure out who you are and how you're going to use the gifts that you have, your strengths, focusing really on the strength. I'm not a huge like focus on the weakness person. I mean, you can, of course, but like I just think that when you look at really successful people who either have great success in a business sense, or they have really great success even in just interpersonal situations, they're focusing on the things that are really good about them. I mean, if you have some things that are detrimental, that are hurting you and that are hurting others, you need to bring those things back into balance, absolutely. But if what I'm talking about is like something really basic, like a kid that's really strong in math but maybe they're not really good in like writing, or a kid that's really good writer and they got some weak math skills, that would be me. Like putting all this energy and focus and effort, like gotta get your math, gotta get this, it's like you could, and then you end up being just kind of sort of in the medium place for both of them, when you actually could be putting so much of that focus in. If you're already really good in something, then why can't you be great in that thing? Then you're achieving this level of greatness, and then once you're at a level of greatness, you actually have a lot more flexibility to say, okay, if I want to go back and strengthen my math, or if it was like math that you're really good in, if I want to go back and strengthen my writing, I can, because I've achieved a certain level of excellence in that one thing. So it allows you to kind of like play around with other things and balance them out. So that's just an approach. But let me think. I'm looking at my notes because I always write some notes. But I think that was it for today. You know, I don't want to make these videos like too long. I have some YouTube videos that are coming out this week where I'm talking about some more things in depth. But I just really wanted to take this moment because it's something that's been coming up, and I've had clients talk about it, and I just kind of see it in the world right now of this, you know, disappointment and in the way things are right now, and how can you move forward, and how can you make those plans, and what is the best thing to do with this energy. That's a kid chasing birds at the beach, by the way. Having a lot of fun. I don't think it's fun for the birds though. But anyway, thank you guys so much for joining in. If you guys have any questions about this video, just post any questions below. You can also DM me. I'm Kaylani. This is the Wild Wahine, and every Wednesday at 1:11 I do a beach live at the beach. I always end these videos with a little bit of the ocean. I give you a little bit of the ocean. I literally can't even see right now in my phone because the sun is facing this way, so the whole phone looks black right now. So I'm hoping that I'm making some sort of eye contact. But thank you guys so much for joining. And if you're interested in a tarot reading or an astrology reading, you can email me at Kaylani, Keilani, at thewildwahine, WAHINE.com. And I can hook you up with my online scheduler. You can also send me a DM because I do look at those. And I hope you guys have a beautiful week, and I will see you next Wednesday. And take care. Thanks. Bye.